could not attend. All right, thank you for joining us. I am going to send you to Lauren Richards to start off our conversation. Go ahead, Lauren.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just kind of diving into our why today. So, routinely, the operations division for Winston-Salem Protected Schools routinely reviews all of our facilities. We do this so that we can evaluate needed capital projects, maintenance, repairs to facilities. And this is something that we do every couple of years on a really large scale. And then we do this on an ongoing basis every couple of months so that we're always reevaluating, allocating funds to support the most significant needs throughout the district. So when we look at evaluating our facilities, we look at all of our building ages. When we talk about the conditions of our facilities, we're looking at the age of different systems that support that facility. So that could be the age and the condition of the roof, a mechanical system, like a cooling tower or an HVAC system, but it also includes flooring systems, lighting systems, grounds maintenance, structural components to the facility. So it's kind of all encompassing of those needs to make sure that that structure is sound and adequate for instruction for our students. We also take a look at how the facility is being used. We know that we oftentimes change programming or grade spans at different schools over the life of a school facility. And so we're evaluating what the trends in the community and the enrollment capacities in those schools may be. So are we seeing an influx of students coming into the community and the school, or are we starting to see a decline in those enrollment numbers at that specific school? We're also looking at the costs to operate a facility. We know as our facilities age, some of those systems get older. And so, what are our utility costs in a facility? What are the costs to maintain the grounds for mowing the exterior to keep that facility looking great as well? And so, we're also looking at surrounding schools. So if you are at a particular school, what new schools might be in the surrounding area? What needs do schools in different geographical locations need? So it's quite extensive. It's quite a bit of dive into those conditions. So one of those items that I just mentioned was talking about our enrollment trends. And so this slide gives you a snapshot of our entire school district enrollment since 1963. And so you can see that there's been some ebbs and flows over time as our enrollment started to rise in the late 60s and then declined and then started to gradually increase again. And if you look to the far right of this slide, in the last 8 to 10 years, you'll see that there has been a gradual decline in our enrollment. You see the 2020, 2021 dip there. That was our COVID year, of course. So it's a little bit of an anomaly in that graph, but there has been an average decline each year of about 500 to 1,000 students. And so one of the other things that we continually assess is predicting our enrollment trends. We work with various contractors to give us projections. Our last projection, that's an internal thing. I don't think they saw that. There we go. Sorry, technical difficulty on our side. The last study that we did was in 2022, and so we are due to do a predictive enrollment study again here in 25, 26. But you can see in that 2022 review, we are projected by 2033 to have a district enrollment of around 45,000 students. If you look at 2025, that prediction was just over 50,000 students, and we are actually just below that today in our actual enrollment already. So we talk about ideal enrollments for our different grade spans, elementary, middle school, and high school grade groupings. This ideal enrollment comes from a lot of different places. You know, over different time periods, schools have been built for different capacities. And we also have state statutes and legislation that talk about appropriate class sizes at different grade spans that also help us decide what should be the average enrollment in a school, as well as all of the support staff that go into providing appropriate education for our students. So we always, of course, have our classroom teachers, but what other supports um, assist our students and our teaching staff throughout the course of a year? We have social workers, we have our finance managers, assistant principals, principals, school psychologists, and the list kind of goes on from there. And so when we are looking at the appropriate enrollment for a school, elementary typically is between 600 and 800 students, middle school 800 to 1200, and our high schools would be 1850 and up for student enrollment. So when we specifically take a look at Cook Elementary School, here is kind of a snapshot of some of the data for that facility. So Cook was originally built in 1950. Um, we did our last major renovation to this facility in 1999. Of course, there are several different maintenance projects that happen in the other years. And in 2025, we are just about due for another 30-year major renovation, depending on what condition all of those different mechanical systems and facilities are in. Our annual operating costs, this includes things like your utilities, your mowing expenses, and that ongoing maintenance day to day, is just over 303,000 annually. And if you were to look to consider replacing this facility, which the information that we have on the equipment and the facility does show us that in 2029, 2030, we would be looking to want to replace this facility. That cost is on average in today's dollars about 50 million. Cook's capacity is a 500 student capacity school. That was pretty average for 1950 school buildings. When we look at our enrollment trends for this school over the last several years, that enrollment trend is declining. And that current average daily membership is around 186 students, which is around 37% of that overall capacity of 500. So as we evaluate those facilities and we evaluate the utilization of different facilities, we then are looking at how we can support our students in the best way possible and what that looks like for the district at large. And so based on that Cook snapshot and looking at our facility assessments, we are considering at this time the closing of Cook Elementary School in June of 2026. This would require us to create new residential boundaries for all of our current residentially assigned students to that elementary school. And these students would then have a new school location that they would attend in the fall of 2026 for the 2026-2027 school year. And so some additional steps, if we were to close Cook Elementary School, would be to ensure that we are supporting our staff members at the school with transfer options to other similar positions that they're in today throughout the district. And then we would also want to have conversations around determining the future property use. And so we don't want to close the school and allow it to sit empty in any one of our communities. We would want to explore opportunities for other uses, either for the district or for the community.
All right, we'll throw this over to Frank Pantano to kind of talk about that where would the students go question.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so I'm Frank, and my job is to make sure that families get to the best possible school for them within our public school system. And so if there were ever to be a school that closes, we need to figure out where those students would be going by default. So that's the residential zone. Doesn't mean where they definitely have to go. We have other options like choice zone schools. We have magnet programs and different things like that. So just geographically, what schools are nearby, we have Ashley nearby. Brunson, which is going to be a new building in 2026, is coming up near where Cook's current location is. Kimberly Park has historically always been nearby to Cook, and Whitaker is also nearby to Cook. So those are some of the schools where if we're redrawing lines to try to figure out what that default residential school would be, it would most likely be one of those schools depending on sort of proximity. The The choice zone schools currently are Brunson, Meadowlark, South Fork, and Whitaker. Quick aside, we do no longer have choice zone transportation provided, but we still have choice, which means that if those are one of the schools that you want to get into and you live in that choice zone, then you do have sort of first crack at seats there. So before it fills up with other people, we're able to get students in. So those seats are still sort of guaranteed, at least first, second, third choice through choice zones. Go on the next slide, we'll see sort of an image of that. So this image has a lot going on, and I wanted to take a second to just kind of walk everybody through it. The most important thing to look at are the dots with the names over them and the black lines. So those black lines show the current boundaries as they exist today. And you can see Cook has this very strange shape around it that kind of snakes over far to the east and actually encompasses where Ashley's new building is slated to be. So you can see that there. You can also see that Brunson is coming up north from where it was previously, almost into that old Cook zone as well. The colors, just so everyone's aware, we are also, I like to think of this as sort of the silver lining to things, is that for 30 years, we've not updated these boundaries. In a lot of ways, we weren't looking at these boundaries as a district, as a community. We weren't paying very close attention. So trying to update these boundaries with the closure of Cook would be very difficult. If it weren't for the fact that we're in the middle of a residential zone redistricting project, so we have all the current data about students, we have all that, and we've been looking at it. And so these colors are actually taken from the residential zone planning project. And you can see where Cook has this pink zone, and it makes a lot more sort of proximity sense to Cook than before. And it also allows for us to make new zones too, for you can see Brunson um, originally was this giant black rectangle going all the way down, whereas the light green would be the new Brunson zone where people would have much shorter drives. And also Ashley's new area would have that sort of dark gray zone. So using these new updated colored pictures here, it's going to be a lot easier for us to kind of figure out what's in proximity. Of course, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We have to figure out what exactly we're doing with Cook before we. I think earlier Lauren explained it really well. Like first steps, do we decide we close Cook, and then the next step would be okay. Now we need to residentially reassign. But you can kind of get an idea where you can see those students that are on the eastern part of Cook's current zone might go to Ashley or Brunson. The southern part might go more likely to Brunson. The northern part, very, very close to Kimberly Park, you can see there's some that are maybe 1 or 2 blocks away. But there's also a large section of the western part that's their closest school would be Whitaker. So we'll work on that to make sure that we can have efficient transportation routes. We can make sure that people are close to their schools. As a parent myself, I always oh, my kid forgot their lunch. It's always easier if I have a closer school to get to. So in some ways, we're going to be able to use this to sort of modernize the way our current residential boundaries are. And of course, there'll be more details on those maps coming very soon as well.
All right, we'll throw it back to Lauren to go through the timeline.
Great, thanks, Frank. So one item that I want to make sure that we reiterate, we're about, well, next week actually, the end of first quarter in the 25-26 school year. And so regardless of any decisions made by the board, all staff and all students will continue at Cook Elementary School for the remainder of this school year. Any changes that were to come will take place in August of 2026 for the next school year. And so coming up August 14th, we do have a public hearing on the potential closure for Cook Elementary School at our Board of Education meeting. We'll give you some detailed information on that opportunity on a later slide. That's 1 week from today. October 28th will be when our board will potentially take a vote on closing Cook Elementary School. If the board were to vote on that decision, we would then, in the month of November, we would be providing student assignment information to all families that are currently enrolled at Cook Elementary so that you're aware of what your residential school assignment would be. again, what your choice zone school options would be. And we also have several magnet schools throughout our district, and we have a magnet fair coming up that will provide you information on that you can also explore those schools as a great opportunity for your child. The school would then close in June of 2026. And then in August of 2026, students would begin at their new school assignment and staff would begin in their new assigned roles throughout the district.
All right, so that concludes the presentation portion of this. If you have a question or two that you would like to ask, go ahead and put it in the chat and let us know. We'll give you a couple minutes to sort of gather your thoughts. Couple of things that we'd love you to consider, and you can maybe just make a comment about this. You know, what should the district do to make any potential transition that might happen successful for students and families, and of course the staff? And what, you know, and in your opinion, as stakeholders, as community members, as families, what could we do to honor the history that of Cook while also meeting the current community needs? So, okay, we'll jump in here. So, Debbie is asking, what if the board votes against the closing of Cook? I think that's one for Lauren.
Sure. Yeah, so if the board votes against the closure of Cook, then Cook Elementary School will remain open for the fall of 2026. Those residential boundaries may not change today as part of a closure process, but as Frank mentioned, we do have a residential zone project kind of underway. But students that live inside that zone today would be able to continue their educational journey at Cook Elementary School.
And if I could ask the next question too, so like what would happen, you know, obviously there is a need for repair replacement. So would we would have to go back and look at that then as well, like figure out if what the cost to repair or to replace might be?
Correct. Yeah. So we would take a look at the list of projects and where they all fall in age. And if we were to look to try to pursue a large bond with our county commissioners and our constituents, voters, of course, have to vote on that. We would then potentially put that replacement school in that 2028 or a 2030 bond cycle. And then any major items that would impact day-to-day operations, like let's say HVAC system were to, you know, be failing or the roof were to be failing, we would put that on a more current project list to make sure that we address it to make sure that the building is sound for staff and students until another decision may be made at a future time.
Yeah. Hi, Pastor Leaks. Thanks for being here. And you, Pastor Leaks, had asked the question of, have parents been notified about the potential closure, and what are their concerns and thoughts? And yes, families have been notified. We started notifications sort of early in August saying that this was potential. The district sort of messaged it broadly, and then families got direct messages here in the last 2 weeks inviting them to this meeting as well as the community meeting this evening. In terms of thoughts or concerns, just stuff that we've seen so far on the feedback form that's come in online. Folks are wanting to know, you know, where is my student going to go? Are they going to be supportive? And I absolutely know if they go to a different school that they're going to be welcome and loved and supported in those schools. So we'll jump to the questions that Mark have. You mentioned this was part of routine from time to time as far as facilities. Are you implying that this valuation was not in any way related to the urgent surrounding the current budget debacle? Yes, this is, well, I'll let Lauren talk about that process, but this is, although this would save money in terms of operational costs, this is not a direct result of that budgetary crisis that we have going on.
Yeah, so we did a presentation to the board back in August talking about our facility replacement needs district-wide. That presentation is available online. There were actually 3 schools that were talked about during that time that are kind of at that replacement cycle. So coming up January 2026, as we plan for a new bond opportunity to put on a ballot in 2028. We would have to evaluate all of our needs throughout the district. And so for the last year to 2 years, we have been sharing various different pieces of information with the board around our facility conditions to be able to do a 5 and a 10-year projection of those needs. The last presentation we did, I think, was in February of 2024, which we projected a $900 million bond need in the next cycle. So this is routine, ongoing work, and the enrollment trends are also kind of playing a part into the reason the recommendation is coming at this time.
Okay, and so you also asked, are you promising placement for the staff within the district of equal position and salary? And I believe that is correct, and I'll just double check with Lauren because I think she was in the meeting with HR where they talked about that.
Yeah, so we went to Cook Elementary last week, myself and our chief of HR, and met with all of the staff members. They had some really great questions and feedback for us. And yes, they will all be provided same salary and similar positions throughout the district. They will be placed on what we call like a priority transfer list, where in the spring they will be provided a list of all of the different vacancies throughout the district ahead of our standard transfer process that we open up every spring around March or April. And that was really important to them to be on a priority list. And that is what they will receive. And we believe that would come out probably around March 15th, although it just depends year to year, but it's always in the month of March.
Okay, and I'll go to Mr. Duncan's third question here, but just a second, Debbie, if you could specify what kind of contracts you're talking about being honored, so we can answer that question. I think this last question that Mr. Duncan is asking is actually probably a question for Frank. How will these moves impact busing students out of the Boston Thurman neighborhood?
Hi. Yeah, so as far as busing students out of a neighborhood, I think the idea from a student assignment perspective is that we're not trying to bus anybody out of anywhere. We're always trying to figure out from a residential zone what the best school is, what the closest school is. I mean, there's other factors that come into play besides just the closest school because there's capacity issues. There's other things you need to look at to make sure that you can fit everybody in and make sure everyone gets lunch at the right time and all those different things. And then one other piece too has to do with feeder patterns. You want to make sure that if you have a large group of elementary school students, you don't want to split them up into 4 or 5 different middle schools as they matriculate past fifth grade. So there's lots of things going on with that. But the main goal would be to make sure that those students have a default school that is as close as possible to their homes.
Great. And so I think a little clarification from Debbie. She's saying, will all the contracts be honored? And you were specifically asking about data managers, the social worker, support staff, and the dean of students. And did that apply to all staff members?
Yeah, so the communication applied to all staff members. However, a caveat that I kind of want to mention that Chris Weikart touched on is some of those different groups that you mentioned in your question, like social worker compared to a data manager compared to a teacher, their contracts are slightly different. How they're placed and assigned and have an opportunity to transfer may be different, specific to their position. And so that would be a specific item for some of those roles. But one of the things that he was working on was getting an FAQ out to staff following that staff meeting so that each of the different groups would kind of know what that process would look like. We actually had the school social worker in that meeting and she asked that question specifically.
Okay, so it sounds like there's going to be some follow-up to staff around that information. And then Trevette is asking if buses are offered for choice schools. And no, this year the district no longer offers buses for choice schools. We do offer them for magnet schools, however, from magnet hub stops.
For one
Oh,
second there.
and Frank wants to add.
Yeah, and just for since I'm talking a lot about proximity and how close schools are, we do have some great magnet schools that are very close to that area. We have Moore Magnet and Diggs Latham Magnet. So Moore Magnet is a STEAM magnet, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And Diggs Latham is our visual and performing arts magnet. And those feed up through some of our popular programs that go through all the grade levels.
Always repping those magnet schools. We have a lot of great options for students out there. All right. That seems like that's sort of all the questions folks have. And you can, I will drop in the chat. We actually have like a digital feedback form. If you want to click on that link, you can actually go to our digital feedback form and offer comments or ask questions there. It's also here on this QR code if you want to scan that. And all the feedback that's provided to that form will actually be provided to the Board of Education for their review in advance of the public hearing. Please join us if you like at the public hearing. That will be October 14th at 6:30 p.m. That's our regular Board of Education meeting, which meets at the Education Building, 4800 Bethania Station Road in Winston. Speakers can have up to 3 minutes to speak, and you just sign up right before the meeting with me, actually. So if that's it, we will log off for the day. Thank you guys so much for spending your lunchtime with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being engaged and for supporting Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools.